The tampon king gets back in the ring. I speak of former VP nominee Tim Walz. He joined Beto O'Rourke at a Texas town hall last night, and the estrogen levels were enough to give Chuck Norris menstrual cramps. I wonder, is our strength our diversity?
Our strength is our diversity. We've been talking about this for years as a country of immigrants.
Tim Walz stumbles onto the political stage with the energy of a stand-in teacher who can't keep order before the lesson even begins. He carries himself as if uncertainty were wisdom, as if every token acknowledgement counted as genuine achievement, and as though repeating shallow slogans were the same as presenting a real plan. But Greg Gutfeld doesn't stop at poking fun. He strips away the facade with sharp, calculated remarks. What's left is a picture of a politician so fundamentally flawed that even those who once cheered for him now look like they're waiting to cash in on a guarantee that never existed.
Politico lingers on candidates' fingers and defend Walz's wide eyes as they claim beards are for bad guys. Tyler, speaking of beards, and I mean the one on your face, not the one that you hang out with.
Is it the shirt?
Yeah, it's the shirt.
Tim Walz has crafted a political persona out of friendliness, folklore, and an air of harmless charm. Yet peel back that cheerful surface, and his style of leadership is the kind you'd laugh at during a pie contest at the county fair. He represents what happens when mediocrity is suddenly pushed onto the big stage. Walz is far from the decisive statesman or bold leader his publicity team insists he is. Instead, he resembles background elevator music, uninspired, forgettable, and eventually irritating. Greg Gutfeld highlights this with biting humor, turning Walz's political career into both a comedy routine and a cautionary tale of failure.
While Kamala's VP, Tim Walz, is being accused of lying about his rank, which is called stolen valor. But in Walz's defense in Minneapolis, stealing is legal. But misrepresenting your past for political gain? I don't see that as a problem, said one woman.
Consider Walz's record on the economy. He parades his time running Minnesota as though it were some dazzling achievement. In truth, it's closer to the clearance rack at a secondhand store. Instead of drawing families and entrepreneurs with opportunity, Minnesota has become a place known for heavy taxes, stunted growth, and regulations that push businesses away. To owners and innovators, the state now feels like a one-star review they'd rather avoid. That's the heart of Gutfeld's critique. Walz treats job creators as if they're bothersome intruders instead of the very foundation of prosperity. It's the kind of policy mindset you'd expect from someone who thinks a stack of play money counts as sound economics.
Hack at Politico writes this piece on the body language from the debate, claiming that it speaks volumes. Yeah, it says that Walz lost, but one of them at Politico says it's like Walz's wide eyes showed his passion and emotional intensity. Can we show that? There is his wide eye.
Now let's look at Walz's idea of public safety. He talks tough about law and order, yet folds quicker than a flimsy lawn chair at the slightest pressure. During his watch, Minnesota's cities endured unrest, surging crime, and violent riots. Rather than acting like a leader, Walz positioned himself more like a spectator at a sports match, offering hazy remarks, calling for patience, and quietly exiting once turmoil erupted. Gutfeld skewers this passivity, comparing his decision-making to a magic 8-ball. Ask Walz about safety, and you're more likely to get a vague, ask again later than a real plan.
Walz also seemed to doubt the validity of the last election and future ones.
They've released analyses of election data out of Clark County, Nevada, that show some pretty convincing evidence of election tampering. So what can we do to make sure, A, that the midterms actually happen, and B, that they're free of fraud?
Yeah, this one's a core. We saw just recently Donald Trump's executive order to make it more difficult, specifically to women, trying to make it more difficult for women.
Education is another disaster under Walz. Instead of focusing on preparing kids with practical skills, his approach leans heavily on ideology and endless layers of bureaucracy. Minnesota's classrooms are drifting away from being places of learning and turning into stages for politics. Walz doesn't seem to mind, so long as the unions remain satisfied. Gutfeld captures this perfectly with his biting humor, portraying Walz as a principal who scraps math lessons in favor of group therapy circles. In his system, raising achievement matters less than lowering the bar so that everyone can share equally in falling short.
That humans would widen their eyes to convey that danger is close. What emotion are you getting from that?
Sorry. Still. That was every.
Like a meerkat.
Think about how people widen their eyes to signal danger. It sparks instant awareness. Now compare that instinct to Walz's performance during the pandemic, which firmly branded him as a political jester. His inconsistent rules left Minnesotans baffled. One day you could grab a drink at the bar but couldn't get a haircut. Massive retail chains stayed open, packed with shoppers, while local gyms were ordered to shut their doors. It felt less like leadership and more like throwing darts blindfolded, chaotic, careless, and completely detached from common sense. Gutfeld captures the absurdity by likening Walz's pandemic plan to a poorly improvised skit where nobody knows the script and everyone feels awkward watching. Schools sat empty, parents were brushed aside, and through it all, Walz acted like a man chasing titles without talent, recognition without effort, and power without accountability.
We see one of the first things they do is try and restrict the vote.
Wait, so Trump is making it more difficult for women to vote? How so? Math problems? But it's further proof that the most dangerous thing for a leftist is a follow-up question, which is why you never hear any. But I guess questioning elections is okay now. But the best moment came when Walz forgot.
Walz doesn't fare any better when he steps into the public eye. Attending one of his speeches feels less like gaining insight and more like wasting oxygen. He stumbles through sentences leaning on cliches that sound ripped straight from a cheesy motivational poster. What's missing is energy, conviction, and any trace of real leadership. Instead, you see a man straining to prove he's in control with all the magnetism of soggy cardboard. Gutfeld drives this point home by turning Walz's speeches into running gags, each more ridiculous than the last. Even his attempts to appear relatable backfire. He ends up resembling that awkward uncle who won't stop rambling about nonsense at Thanksgiving dinner. Politically, he's the equivalent of generic cereal, technically the same as the brand name stuff, but dull, flavorless, and forgettable. And yet, he represents something worse, what happens when politics rewards passivity instead of courage. Walz is no innovator, no reformer, not even a capable administrator.
Walz continues to be criticized for embellishing his rank and service. After it came out over the weekend, he once claimed to be an official bikini inspector. Walz's direct superior in the National Guard says Walz knew his unit was about to deploy to Iraq and went behind the back of his superior officer to resign. When reached for comment, Walz yelled, "Hey, look over there!"
Walz doesn't so much lead as simply occupy space, standing in the office like someone stuck in line, not because he earned the spot, but because no one ever asked him to leave. Gutfeld brands him the ultimate political squatter, a man with power who contributes almost nothing. Even his own supporters struggle to justify their praise. When they applaud his steady hand or calm demeanor, what they're really acknowledging is his habit of doing nothing and hoping nobody notices. It's like congratulating a doctor for keeping a straight face while the patient flatlines. Gutfeld ridicules this hollow defense, pointing out that Walz's version of leadership is waiting out problems until people forget they existed. The mockery cuts even deeper when Walz responds to criticism, hiding behind a fog of empty words. Yet, no matter how thick the smoke and mirrors, the illusion collapses quickly, leaving the emptiness of his record on full display.
Walz says Democrats hate success.
We as Democrats, we want people to pay their fair share, but why are we against people being successful like that? We can't be. Why are we against? We should talk about businesses. Not all businesses exploit their workers, and we get ourselves stuck in that.
Oh, well,
and I think we lose them.
Ghetto.
Any claim that Walz believed his own inflated image is shattered once Gutfeld takes aim. This isn't just about poking at a few weaknesses. It's about tearing down the whole facade. Walz represents the textbook politician who clings to power without knowing how to use it, mistaking the act of holding office for genuine leadership and confusing titles with actual achievements. In the age of Donald Trump, the contrast couldn't be career. Trump, whatever one thinks of him, projected boldness, certainty, and an unmistakable voice. You always knew where he stood. Walz, by comparison, embody vagueness, mediocrity, and hesitation. One commands the room, the other fades into the wallpaper. In Minnesota's story, Walz is less a chapter than a footnote, the kind of governor people struggle to recall during turbulent times. And as long as his forgettable record lingers, Gutfeld's roast will continue to lampoon his legacy of political amnesia.
Our strength is our diversity. We've been talking about this for years as a country of immigrants, and we let them define the issue on immigration. We let them define the issue on DEI, and we let them define what woke is. We got ourselves in this mess because we weren't bold enough to stand up and say, you damn right we're proud of these policies. We're going to put them in, and we're going to execute them.
So, wait, you lost because you weren't woke enough? That's like telling Joy Behar she's not eating enough Doritos.
Walz's political story collapses under Gutfeld's spotlight, not because of a single slip or heated debate, but because the truth stripped away the illusion. What remains is emptiness, a politician scrambling to appear relevant in a world that has already moved on without the skill, presence, or conviction to keep up. Gutfeld doesn't merely crack jokes at Walz's expense, he unmasks him as the hollow stand-in for everything broken in American politics. Walz proves that a leader with no vision can sometimes be more dangerous than one with bad ideas. The irony is that he still imagines he's fooling people. With his trademark half smile, he acts as though he's running some elaborate strategy, when in reality, the only game he knows is political hide and seek. He ducks responsibility, hoping no one bothers to look. Meanwhile, the media cushions him like fragile glass, portraying him as pragmatic, even though a single honest shake would leave him shattered.
With Walz, it's hard to even bring him up. He has a resting snitch face, you know? I mean, he forfeited his man card during COVID and the riots. And you're right. And also, at that diner, of course, he left early. So don't you find it weird that for a terrifying threat to democracy that Trump is, not a single interviewer in his history has approached him with...
Gutfeld spots this tactic instantly and turns Walz into material that practically writes itself. If elections were decided on enthusiasm alone, Walz wouldn't stand a chance. His roast reveals a pattern. He avoids risks, sidesteps bold moves, and never offers anything memorable. At a time when true leadership demands toughness, Walz serves up the equivalent of lukewarm oatmeal. Technically, it's food, but nobody's asking for seconds. Even his attempts to project strength come off as laughable. With all the passion of an art teacher explaining brushstrokes, he speaks of lofty goals, yet his stance betrays uncertainty. Gutfeld nails the parody by likening Walz's governing style to someone blandly reading a grocery list, and still, Walz insists he's the most qualified for the role. His idea of consensus is little more than postponing hard decisions until circumstances leave him no choice but to take the path of least resistance.
It's amazing how they operate one way when they're running, and then when they lose and get humiliated, all of a sudden they have these solutions, and they're all the things we're telling you to do. Like, why are you trying to trash one of the most successful companies in the world, you moron?
And they never did that because they all used to love Trump when Trump was giving them money.
Yeah.
Then Trump became like Rodney Dangerfield in Caddyshack.
Yeah.
He crashed their party, showed up at the White House, and it was just like, hey, you know what? We should put like a casino over there, an MMA ring.
Consensus isn't leadership. It's procrastination dressed up as strategy. Minnesota has learned the hard way that waiting for someone else to act is nothing short of surrender. And that surrender carries weight. Backlogged criminal cases, frustrated business owners, disheartened parents, and worn-out residents. The roast cuts even deeper when Walz is set against the current president, Donald Trump. When Trump steps into a room, the air shifts, bold, forceful, and unafraid to spark conflict. When Walz appears, the only shift is people searching for the nearest exit. One figure radiates energy, the other drains it. One thrives on decisive action, the other survives on hesitation.
And look at I'm especially talking about these old white guys who seem to disappoint us on a regular basis in this country.
Dude. You're an old white guy. And you're right, you are a huge disappointment. I guess hating himself is the first thing he's nailed correctly. Because Walz saying old white men suck isn't a political stance. It's his confession.
Gutfeld zeroes in on this dynamic, pointing out that Walz isn't just unsuited for leadership, he practically recoils from it. Even his supporters sound uneasy when offering praise. They lean on phrases like quiet leader or steady presence, which are really just polite stand-ins for ineffective and dull. When there are no real accomplishments to highlight, you fall back on compliments like these. If Walz were an office worker, HR might call him dependable only because there's nothing else to put on his review. Gutfeld cuts through the illusion, reminding everyone that Walz didn't rise through brilliance or vision. He isn't steering the course of politics. He's merely a background character filling space because the role has to be occupied. The roast makes it plain. Tim Walz isn't shaping the future. He's just holding a title.